I'm Mary Lee Gatewood, and on July 7th, 1946, Harriet and Perry Paul and their two teenage daughters, Mary Lee and Glennis, arrived in the Valley of the Sun. July 7th was a very hot day, and it was a very memorable day. We came not straight from Iowa, where we were born, but by way of Omaha, Nebraska. The last day of World War II was the last day my father worked in the tool and gauge lab for Glenn L. Martin. My parents believed, and I think we all thought, we can go home again. But that didn't prove out. My father was disappointed in his job. The housing was deplorable, what there was of it. And so it didn't take much encouragement from his youngest brother to come to Arizona. He assured my father there were plenty of jobs, but again, housing was very limited. So my folks went to Des Moines one day, and in about 6 weeks, a house trailer was delivered in Des Moines from Elkhart, Indiana. My father took two of my friends and I to Des Moines, and we brought the trailer back home so it could all be packed up. It was a wonderful place for the last slumber party. We came to Arizona then, and like I said, it was hot. I don't even remember whether we had cooling in the car. Did we, Gary? All I know is we did need a spot to put that trailer, and my uncle drove us around town, and there were several things that were memorable to me, seeing Phoenix for the first time. I remember being out on Grand Avenue, out at the citrus sheds. Do you remember how bad they smelled when they were burning grapefruit rinds? But you could get like a big paper fascia bag full of grapefruit for 50 cents. And I can remember my uncle buying both Terry and I a bag of grapefruit. Well, it probably kept us quiet in the car. And we were fortunate, I think, that we went through those in a hurry, because we probably had very little enamel left on our teeth. Another thing that I remembered he took us to see was a corner lot, probably at about the mid Phoenix now, and on these mailboxes there were names like Jesus and Angel, and I thought that was the blasphemous thing I had ever seen. I could not believe that. So it was soon time to think about going to school, but we did find a spot for our trailer. The good news was it was only about 2 or 3 blocks from a swimming pool. The bad thing was our allowance only covered 6 days of going swimming. You might have thought that we turned into angels and did all kinds of things to get earn the money to get that last days, but we probably whined our way into that. Going to school was going to be a big challenge when you're just 16 and hitting that great big campus at Phoenix Union. It was intimidating. And after spending the all summer at the swimming pool, it wasn't something that I looked forward to. I was embarrassed because one of the girls at the swimming pool asked, "Do you have any clothes to wear to school?" We lived in our bathing suits. I assured her that we did. But like I said, it was an intimidating campus, and when I got to my homeroom class, I was so glad to see one of the boys from the swimming pool. When he came through the door, even though I said, "Hi, Cliff," he kept going, got halfway across the room, and turned around and said, "Lee, I didn't recognize you with clothes on." Well, I survived Phoenix Union that year, and my mother was quite persistent that we find something more than a house trailer to live in. It might have been because the cooling, the evaporative cooling that my uncle and my dad fixed up was noisy, and trailers weren't very big in those days. They were single wide.
28 feet.
28 feet. That's not a lot of room even for 4 people. But something else too, that cooler was noisy, but if you didn't have anything tied down or a rock on it, it ended up against the back wall of the trailer. We moved out, what the kids called, we moved out on 40th and plowed ground, and that really wasn't so. It was only 20th Street and Camelback, but it was way out in the country, and we were surrounded by cotton fields. I graduated from North High, and Terry did too, and we started to call her Terry, but she had been Glennis up until we got to Phoenix Union. After high school, well, it was actually during my senior year in high school, we went to Grand Canyon, and I fell in love with Grand Canyon. It was such an awesome place, and I saw all those pine trees, and it was much cooler looking than Phoenix in July. So we stopped at the information desk on the way out, and the park ranger said, you know, if you want a job, why, all you do is just write Fred Harvey. I did. I wish I'd kept that letter. I don't know what I told him. I apparently told him I would be the best Harvey girl they ever hired, and they hired me. So I did. I worked at Bright Angel Lodge. I was a Harvey girl, and it was, working at the Grand Canyon was kind of like a way of life. I mean, you had part of your day, you went to work. After work, you got off, you took your laundry to the laundry, and your uniforms to the laundry. Then you found some horses someplace, and you rode until it was almost dark, went home, took a shower, scooted between the sheets for 30 minutes, and then headed back down to Bright Angel Lodge, square dance to dance, and sometimes you just barely made it home in time to go to work at 20 minutes to 6 the next morning. And
You forgot Raw Well. We went out to Raw Well.
I wasn't going to tell them that. That was after the dance at Bright Anyway, so I had so much fun, I decided to let my little sister come up the next year. Now, we hadn't spoken to each other for I don't know how long, or barely spoken. If it was not with the kindest of words. But she came up and found her a job. She didn't work as a Harvey girl, she was a laundry queen. And she worked over at the laundry, but she also listened to me, and after that, why we talked, because, I don't know, one of the pilots or something on the airline decided he'd ask her out, and I decided she was too young, she wasn't about to. I probably wanted to go out with him myself. Anyway, it was a wonderful first job for a teenager. You talk to people from all over the world, all over the United States. You had fun. Sometimes you got into trouble. One of the things that we got into trouble for was the laundry had a steam whistle, and it went off at noon. And very often in the dining room of Bright Angel Lodge, why somebody say, "What's that? What's that?" Well, if they were really, really curious, and they were pretty nice people, we told them it was the whistle on the steamboat coming down the Colorado. Well, it wasn't too long, the transportation manager was in the dining room yapping at the hostess who wanted to know what. Everybody wanted to buy a ticket on the steamboat, and we please quit telling them there was one. After that, I came back, went to college. at ASU, but continued working at Grand Canyon in the summertime. Went another year, or half a year at ASU, and convinced my father that Flagstaff was much smaller, and the campus wasn't so big, and that I would really like to rather go to NAU to college rather than ASU. And right after a huge snowstorm, he took me up and I lived on campus at NAU and graduated. I got both my master's and my BS at NAU. After going to back to the Grand Canyon, I said I rode horses. I really felt I was something special because I was going to buy a horse, and the Supai Indians were going to be bringing in a bunch of wild horses from the canyon. Went way out on the west rim, and it was really a beautiful sight. It was getting close to sundown, and these horses came up over the ridge and all in silhouette. There was an old Navajo man out there too. He too was looking for a horse to buy, and out of maybe 40 horses they brought in, we both decided we wanted the same one. Well, I prevailed and I got it, but I felt pretty good. I figured somebody that knew something about horses more than I did we both had a good eye for a horse. That isn't what my father called that horse. It was something like he was jug-headed and pigeon-breasted, and I don't know, he had a few other words to say about that horse. Anyway, after I graduated from college, signed a contract and went to Window Rock, Arizona to teach school. Now, Window Rock is not completely isolated. It was 26 miles from Gallup, New Mexico, and you'd think that there wouldn't be much to do there, but we found lots to do. There was square dancing, there was regular dancing, there was hiking, there was a Civil Air Patrol Cadet Corps in the boarding school, and my friend helped with that. So I didn't have a car, so the best thing to do was I became one of the owners of a small Piper Cub, J3, Piper Cub, and did get to see quite a bit of the country on that. But I got to, because we were active in the Civil Air Patrol, we did get to bring some of the cadets down, and that was my first introduction to Chandler. Well, we went through Chandler up to Williams Air Force Base. That was kind of an interesting experience. I was the first woman officer on the base. The other one came in the next day. No one knew what to say. You know, you're an officer and a gentleman, and so everybody was saying, "Sir, ma'am, sir, ma'am." Go to leave a building, and then did rank proceed, or did ladies proceed? It was just best that you went by yourself, you came home by yourself. Another experience we had was General Vandenberg was going to be on the base watching his son graduate from pilot's training. So we were used to seeing groups of 10, 12, 16 men in a group coming down the road. And that base was absolutely immaculate. The lawns were manicured. There were little signs that says, "Don't walk," or "Don't step on the grass," or don't walk on the grass. But the morning that I ran into those 3 flights of guys coming at me, just as I got fairly close, they broke rank, and I had to salute every single solitary one of them. Before the other 2 got to me, I didn't walk on the grass, I ran on the grass. So, anyway, I do remember when I was went back to work at Tuba City, we set up some programs for 8910 students to take some field trips. And I did send them through Chandler, visited Steel Bakery, and went out to the air base where they were treated very nicely also. When we lived in Tuba City, it was close enough that we got down here fairly often. And one of the first things I remember about Chandler was visiting Terry and Norman and the kids and going downtown to Maxwell Street days. That was a wonderful experience. And I probably met more people than I believe that probably lived in Chandler at Maxwell Street days. You could hit the wonderful sales. You could go over to Bash's and have a 2 for a nickel hot dog or a 2 for a nickel Coke. I'm not sure what it was. You could sit out in the grass, out in the park, and then let the kids go to the movie in the afternoon. Many of those, the gals that I remember meeting were hospital auxiliary members, and they were helping the merchants. The auxiliary members worked for the merchants who paid them, and then they donated that to their hospital auxiliary. So, you know, Arrow Pharmacy may have had 2 or 3 Lavender Pinafore ladies working for them, or Sabas, or Williams stationery store, yes. And do you remember when there was a Staples in Chandler?
Oh, yes.
Okay, and I think they were going out of business on a Maxwell Street day. There was Staples, there was the Yorktown Cafe, there was Arrow Pharmacy, Dudding's. There was it the Star Cafe?
Isn't there a Bottom Tennessee store?
I can't remember, but there was a J.C. Penney's and a Sabas. And
Esbers.
who?
Esbers.
Esbers.
It's a Lonnie's Tavern, did I hear?
Oh, yeah, Lonnie's is there.
Rascals,
Yeah, Wesco's. And
Davidson, Reliable Hardware.
that's the one I was trying to think of last night, and couldn't think about it. There was a Swin bicycle.
Valley National Bank.
There was was it a Great Western Bank too?
No, Arizona Bank.
Arizona Bank.
Arizona Bank, okay. But there were lots of places where there was really a crowd downtown on Maxwell Street days. You could hardly get through the crowd. But it wasn't long till my husband decided that he wanted to go back to school and work on his doctorate. And we've been at Tuba City about 10 years, and he had left the school district and was head of this community center. But he had been encouraged to go back and work on his doctorate for his doctorate of education.
Mary Lou,
Yes.
where and when did you meet your husband?
Oh, I met him at NAU. I'm not sure we talked. He came through line and he really liked milk. And I worked in the cafeteria and I would sneak him an extra carton of milk. But that first day I went to school to teach in Window Rock, this beautiful yellow old 88 pulled up, and this boy said, "Would you like a ride to school?" Well, I turned around and I recognized that face. You know, certainly I would like a ride to school. We were walking up there. Well, how did I know that that car was a loaner to his brother? Anyway, we were married. we were married at Ganado, where he had attended school, and then after we went back to school the first time, so he could finish his degree and his master's, we signed as teachers at Tuba City and taught. We were there for about 10 years, and he wanted to come back and go to school. He was applied for and was accepted into the doctoral program at ASU. Well, my parents were sure that we were going to come to Phoenix, just as sure as we were not going to be involved in a big city, and we headed for Chandler. Well, why not? We knew everybody in town, it seemed like it did, and there were wonderful things to do. There were wonderful parties. There was Girl Scouts. There was Lions Club. There was foreign exchange student barbecue. I didn't have sense enough to say no, and somehow I got roped in on the Mexican dinner. Remember that over at the Cleveland School? It was a big fundraiser. It was a big money maker. So we stayed in Chandler and lived in Chandler, and our girls not started school. One was in the 5th grade, one was in the 7th grade, and we stayed there until Sarah Folsom, who was superintendent of schools, called him one day on the phone and said, "Will you come work for me?" Well, that sounded pretty good. He worked at the State Department, and he knew it would give him some good training. And so he worked over there until somebody asked him if he'd like to work as superintendent of schools at Chinle, Arizona. Now, at that time, Chinle was, the school district was approximately the same as Chandler School District. The budget was approximately the same, only Chinle School District was the largest school district in the nation geographically. And we went to Chinle, but the girls and I came back, and they entered high school. They entered high school here, and then as soon as they kind of left home and went to school, I got somehow involved down at the mini mall, and my first job or enterprise down there was the art gallery. Does anybody remember Gallery 5? If you had looked at Phoenix Home and Garden, the December issue, you would have seen one of the gals that was in that, Marty Beeson. We really did have some fine artists that participated in the gallery down there. But artists aren't particularly interested in business, and so we kind of fell apart, and I got to pick out a place when they opened up the Market Square part of the mini mall down there, and opened my own gift shop with a friend, and we had the little post office in there, and we had handcrafted gifts and cards. That kind of grew. Buddy had broken his neck, and he didn't really have anything to do. He was wearing a brace, and Esther from Esther's Flower put in a little shop down there, and she had to, because she was in Altrusa, and she had to have a business, so it was kind of a fake business, and Buddy got started babysitting her shop and carving a little bit while he was in there. Then somebody who was supposedly teaching Kachina doll carving quit and left the students in the store and everything in a lurch. And so Mary Jo came over and said, "Will you help us out? Will you finish teaching this class?" Which he did, and that was where he started doing his Kachina carving, because It was something that he could do with a brace on his neck, something that he hadn't done before, but he could keep himself busy too. I believe I was down at the Calico Cat, which was the name of my store, and at that time I advertised that I was the only licensed cat house in town. And I also passed out 3 whorehounds. Moved into a bigger store and down there, but was still we were having an awful time with the city. The city kept tearing up the streets, tearing up the sidewalks, tearing up this, tearing up that. You couldn't get there from here. So I thought coming downtown would be better. So that's, as soon as I got downtown, or kind of got some of that taken care of downtown, they tore up all the streets downtown too. So Buddy and I combined our stores, and we were at 98 South San Marcos Place. Again, had the post office, had Southwestern Gifts. Let's see, and then of course he had his he had the Conchita dolls, and he really enjoyed teaching people from all over the United States. I was telling somebody the other day when heard the news about Cairo and about Egypt. I wonder if his Conchita doll survived that attack at the Alexandria Museum, because he did have one in there. And it was one that he and one of his carvers kind of made together. The man that donated it to the museum was on Jack Cousteau's team. It was really a pleasure to live in Chandler. I never felt like I was a stranger. I could go any place. Buddy sometimes didn't appreciate it that much when he went to the grocery store, and it took an hour to just pick up a couple of things, but you met everybody in town that you hadn't seen for a couple of days. I left a turkey on the cart one day, and Margaret Andreotti stopped on the way home from work and said, "You left this on your cart?" I'm not sure you get direct service like that in very many places. Do you have any questions?
Mary Lee,
Yes.
while you were at Grand Canyon, did you get to ride down in the canyon on the mules?
Yes.
That's quite a trip, isn't it?
It's even better when you ride down after dark, so the Park Service rangers don't catch you when you're riding your horse. I went down there one day, and Terry and a couple of friends were coming down, and we had told the supplies that we needed some horses for an overnight camping trip. Well, we certainly didn't tell them where we were going. But I went down and took some of the supplies down. Terry and friends came down in the middle of a terrible lightning and rainstorm. We couldn't get the horses through the tunnels, and nobody was going to walk out on that swinging bridge with the horses. But we made it.
Well, when Marie and I went down in 47, senior class, we got down to the bottom, and it had been raining like the devil on us. We had a little box lunch, and we ate, and started back up, and when we got halfway out, it snowed on us all the rest of the way. And that big shower and that commune shower over there felt great. But the whistle never flew.
No. Ask Terry what it's like to crawl up and down that canyon in a rainstorm with my mother in tow.
That was an experience.
Your Levi's get very wet and very heavy, and the trail was washing out, and they were trying to find the phones to let the cowboy barn know that the trails were washing out, and they were ahead of the trail riders on the mules.
It's quite expensive to go down today, but when we went down, it was $15 a piece.
Yeah.
I went down with, we were in the same class, and I was first behind this guide. And we'd just gone a little ways, and I knew I wasn't gonna ride clear to the bottom and back. I was scared to death. But I knew someplace not too far down, they took your picture. So I stayed on.
All 100 feet of it to every pose.
No, they took my picture, and then I got out, and he said, "Get on that thing, we gotta go." And I said, "I'm not going." And I stood against that rock like this. He called me everything under the sun. He said, "People are listening." And I just stood there against that rock until they all went, and I went back upstairs. Oh,
We got down to Indian Gardens, and there was a place to rest, and then we went on down to the river. Went through Devil's Canyon, I guess that's what they call it.
Under.
And that was scary over there.
it was scary.
I'll tell you what's even scarier. You unload your horse and you're putting everything in the creek and you're trying to fix your bedroll and stuff, and you plunk it down, and as you're putting it down a rock to hold it down because the wind's starting to blow, the rattlesnake rattles. So,
Mary Lee,
yes,
when Bob and I were married, we went to Grand Canyon for our honeymoon. And we were going down into the canyon, and Bob was 5 pounds too heavy. He was not a big man. I mean, he wasn't fat, but he was 5 pounds, so we couldn't go. And I wasn't going alone.
Well, when we went down, Marie was on a mule named Juanita. And Juanita walked up to the edge and put the hooves down on the very edge of that rock, and it was just straight down. Oh boy, talk about.
those mules did that, and they know which people to do it to. They get right on the very edge.
I don't think
But it was really better to go down after dark, especially if you were afraid of high places like I was, because you could close your eyes and you figured those horses knew where they were going.
But when
And
we
you
got
keep
back
saying
up on the top.
horses.
Yes,
You keep saying horses.
I say horses because the Park Service and Fred Harvey owned the mules, and it costs money.
Oh, okay.
And
So
so
you
we
had your
go.
own horses there?
I had my own horse there, yeah, and I had the best of both worlds. I had my horse there in the summertime. I turned it loose with the Supai horses in the wintertime, and then in the spring they'd bring them up and supposedly top them off. Not always, but
Really nice to dance in, right Angel Lodge. In front of that big fireplace.
yeah, there's a museum in there now, and I can say that I'm really old enough to be hung in a museum. My picture is in the museum as a Harvey girl.
Where was your husband born? Where was he from?
My husband is he's a Navajo Indian. He's born in Fort Defiance, Arizona. And he worked at Window Rock. He worked at Chinle Public Schools, and he worked at Tuba City Public Schools. They were both Bureau of Indian Affairs schools as well as public schools. Public schools were newer as far as there were a lot of one-room public schools on the reservation for families who were not Indian for their children to go to. But they were starting to build up, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs school. I did do my student teaching in a Bureau of Indian Affairs school, and really had a good experience. The superintendent of schools needed to go out and visit all these little schools like Denavoso, that is, at one time it was supposed to be the furthest community from a railroad in the United States. And he would need to talk to his teachers, and then I got to go into the classroom and kind of keep tabs on the kids while he and the teacher were in the office. that school at Denham. So we stood in the doorway and the teacher looked up and she nodded to us and smiled, said hello, and she turned to her class and she said something which I didn't understand. She looked at them again and said it again, had them repeat it. I still didn't understand until she wrote it on the blackboard. We have a visitor, but when you have such a Boston accent, somebody from Arizona doesn't understand it, and here are these little kids out in Denahozo learning English with a Boston accent.
Were the schools segregated?
But
Were the schools segregated as far as the?
no, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, those were boarding schools, and yes, those were only for Indian kids. And but the public schools were open to all colors, all tribes. And when we were at Tuba City, we had a village just a couple of miles from Tuba City called Moenkopi, which was it was a Hopi village. And so usually those kids from the Hopi went to first and second grade in Hopi and then came up third or fourth grade into the Tuba City public schools.
You have school buses?
Yes. Yes, we had school buses. They went, when we were at Chidley, I think the longest bus ride was about 63 miles one way. And it's cold up there. It's really cold up there. When I was at Window Rock and Fort Defiance, I just barely got started teaching, and on the school grounds at Window Rock School in Window Rock, when some of the classes, there were more kids that year, and they were over at Fort Defiance, and they were 6 miles away. Well, I don't know how it was, but I got elected, and I got to drive the school bus back and forth every day.
There wasn't heat on the bus, right?
Yeah, I guess so. That's what it said. And then I drove a big bus at Tuba City too, when the kids outgrew the schools and there were too many, and we went down to the Presbyterian church where there were two rooms that could be made into 3 classrooms. There were 3 of us down there, and I drove the school bus down. Usually I made the kids walk in the church driveway and go into the hostel in the back. This one day we had been hearing bang, 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 bang all morning long. And when we came back at noon, I took one look and told my kids, held out my coat and said, run, run, run. So Wilmer Holiday kept saying, Mrs. Gatewood, I know why we ran. And I said, no, you don't, Wilmer. Well, there was a hostel right next to the church, and it's where many of the Navajos, when they brought someone into the hospital, if they left them in the hospital, they could stay overnight. They brought their own bedrolls. There was a stove in there. And so we were used to seeing bedrolls or blankets out there. And when we'd gone to recess in the morning, a Navajo teacher came over. She followed me over across the street to the boarding school playground, and she was ashen. And so I said, Jane, are you sick? You need to go home. No. She said, you know that blanket's laying out there by that bedroll that's laying out there, and that mattress by the hostel? And I said, yeah. She says, it's a body. Well, when we went back, there the body was, stitched stark naked, laying by the coffin that they'd been building all morning. And so we got in there and didn't disturb their coffin making and burial. Were there any other questions?
I was gonna say, when we went down, those bellhops arranged for the horses. And of course had been raining, and it was after dark when we started down, and my horse, I don't know, I think one of the big hats they brought us fell off, and the horse spooked, and reared up and started back up. We never got it back over that spot. And when the lightning would flash, all you could see was, well, the horses, if you had the saddlebag on there, would brush against the wall, so they'd go over the edge and couldn't see anything over the edge. And I think we were down there 3 days. We went down Kaibab Trail. It's steep.
You
And,
didn't get caught so easy.
And we came back up, and here's this Supai on his horse glaring at us. We stayed down there, what, 3 days? And I didn't know my mare had a nursing foal.
It liked to jump switchbacks too.
Did you ever think when you came out from Iowa, from the Midwest, did you ever think that you would have had this colorful a life? Did you ever imagine that it would have been that exciting?
No, I think the most exciting thing that I can imagine then was I was going to get to decastle corn that year and make some money.
Who taught you how to fly?
There was the guy that had the canteen in Fort Defiance was a licensed pilot, and everybody but me, when I bought into that, had their license. And then my husband, I did not get my license. That was about the same time that we were getting married, and my thought was, when you go up in a plane, you come down in a plane. My husband thought it would be great if I would fly and he could jump. And he's still jumping. Last May he did his about 60-second parachute jump at 81 years old.
Mom was about ready to kill us. That was his birthday present, and she didn't think that was a good idea. But I want to say one thing. When Mom and Dad was down here, when we came down to Chandler, I was junior high, and they were still active in the school, and she was one of the first ones that organized the first big 7th grade party at the pool. I don't know if Pagertons remember that, but a lot of us in Brian's, her and a bunch of them, we had our first big school party. Now they have them where they're all night, so the kids stay in and you're safe and everything, but they were always doing something, and we were at fashion shows to raise money for this or that, but it's always for the school, so she's always been active in school life, and especially here in Chandler too.
I think my sister was ready to kill me. They moved into our duplex we'd moved out of that was over on Iowa Street, and where the Nazarene Church is, it was just bare ground over there. They did have some playground equipment. But I was telling the girls, well, I know someone you can get acquainted with. The Jew girl lives over there. And she looked at me like, we were never taught to say something like that. Well, it was Carol Jew.
Several times she said, have you met the Jew girl yet?
Mary, what year she came to Chandler? What year she came to Chandler?
I think, what year did you come to Chandler? 46, 47?
No, that was when we arrived in the valley. I think we came to Chandler in about 1967.
Well, I know, but I mean, when you first came through here.
To Phoenix.
To Phoenix.
Yeah, 1946.
6, yeah.
Where was that swimming pool that you moved?
Joyland Swimming.
Joyland?
Yeah, Joyland.
On 40th Street and Van Buren.
About 32nd, 38th, no, about 36th, 38th
She
Street.
was probably up
They had the big slide.
Right, and it was hard on your bathing suit.
40th Street.
What must have been when the guy asked you, he'd never seen you with clothes on.